Today we are talking about measure of variation, which is different from measure of center that you learned from the last video. Measure of variation is talking about the distribution of data, so how is it spread out? This is a box plot that you see, but you will also have to compare lists of data, dot plots, bar graphs, tables, and sometimes pie charts. Now on that box plot, you saw a bunch of different words. This is your 5-number summary. You've got the minimum, your lower quartile, also known as Q1 or quartile 1, your median, your upper quartile, also known as Q3 or the third quartile, and your maximum. So you can memorize this by just looking at your hand. Now, 3 of these are pretty self-explanatory of how to find. The minimum is the smallest number, the maximum is the largest number, and then you learned median last time where you list the values from least to greatest, and then you pick the middle value. Sometimes you'll have 2 numbers in the middle, and that's fine. You just find the mean of these 2 values. Quartile 1 and quartile 3 are a little different. You just have to find the median all over again, but you find the median of the lower half or the upper half, hence why it's called the lower quartile and the upper quartile. So we can see an example here, and in our example, we had to find the median first. So when they found the median, they got these 2 numbers to be in the middle, and that's fine. They just had to find the average of these 2 numbers, and that's how they said that the median was 10. But then they had to divide it in half, and they looked at the lower half and the upper half. And in the lower half, luckily, it's already listed from least to greatest because you had to find your median in the first place. And then they just cross out one on the left, one on the right, did it again, and hey, they found their quartile 1, which is also the median of the lower half. They did the same thing on the upper half, and that's how they found quartile 3. So essentially, you're finding the median 3 different times. Okay, range was something that you heard last time. Range is just your highest value minus your lowest value. IQR is known as your interquartile range, and that's where you subtract your Q3 minus your Q1. Now be careful to do Q3 minus Q1 because if you did it the opposite, you're going to get a negative number, and your interquartile range should never be a negative number. Okay, so fun or helpful facts. You're going to be asked questions in the future. Essentially, everything you're going to be asked is comparing different types of data points. It might be 2 box plots or 2 dot plots or a couple of different lists of data that you then have to turn into a dot plot. And sometimes you're going to ask which one has the larger variation. Now, when it asks which one has the larger variation, it will have to be specific based on whether it's talking about based on your range or based on your IQR. Looking at this example, we've got a range that's about just over 30 to 100. So that's about upper 60s. Let's say 68 is our range here. Here we've got maybe 25-ish to 100. So our range here would be about 75-ish. So if it asked based on the range, if we called this A and this B, then B would have the larger variation based on the range. Now, sometimes it's going to ask based on your IQR. And you really don't have to find the exact numbers if it's asking which one has the larger variation. So if the question says which one has the larger variation based on your IQR, well, in this case, A would be larger because this box area, this is representing our Q1 and our Q3, this box is larger than the second box. And that's why our IQR variation would be larger for the first one. So you do have to be careful. Is it asking for variation for your range or your IQR? Clustering is a word that you might see pop up, and that's just when many data points are close together. So the first example is in dot plot. The second example is in a scatter plot. If you were to look at a box plot, it would be the areas that are super close together. And if you see a triangle on a dot plot, that's where the mean or the average is. You won't always see a triangle, but since it's called a dot plot and you see a triangle, which is not a dot, I did want you to know what that means. Sometimes you'll be asked to add the mean onto the dot plot, and in that case, you would add a triangle. Another fun, helpful fact is that your IQR is always the middle 50% of your data. And so that's just a helpful fact if it ever asks you a question referencing your IQR. That is all the helpful fun facts that I have for you. I'm sure you'll have questions because this is talking about a lot of different ways to represent data. And there's a lot of questions that could be asked based on comparing the two. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me and I would be happy to help.